Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today, I have got a special video I'm preparing with my friend over here, JP from Arcade. Many of you probably already know what Arcade is, but there are also probably many people in my audience that do not know that yet. It is a project I'm very bullish on. They've got some really interesting ideas and some awesome vision for the space and for GameFi in general. And as you guys know, I'm a perma Illuvium bull, but I like the idea of using platforms like Arcades to give myself exposure to other games in different ecosystems and things like that. It would make it a really easy way for me to diversify, and I'm sure that's part of JP's plans, but we're going to jump straight into it. So, JP, what role do you have at Arcade?
Hey guys, so yeah, I am the CEO and a co-founder at Arcade. So uh, I'm working with a few of the smartest and most hardworking people I've ever met. So I'm thankful for where I'm at.
And so, can you tell the audience a little bit about what Arcade is and what kind of the long-term vision that you're trying to fulfill there?
Yeah, of course. So I think the easiest way to think about it is, Arcade's kind of this infrastructure layer that we're trying to support the rest of the GameFi ecosystem with. So our main goal or the long-term vision, I guess, is it's a few different things. Number one is probably to lower the barrier to entry into the GameFi space as a whole. Make it easier for people to tap into the ecosystem. Because when we started building, in this space, we noticed that a lot of people are running into issues like a lack of time, a lack of energy, interest, or money to gain exposure to the space. Now, GameFi is obviously very in its infancy, but even so far, we've already seen that it's really hard to keep up with everything, right? Like it's probably a full-time job for you to just keep up with Illuvium. Now multiply that by 30 games or 50 games, and it's like there's no way you can keep up with everything. So Arcade seeks to fill this need in the industry for people to have, like you said, this diversified exposure to the best parts of GameFi without the need to own every single NFT or learn every single game. So that's kind of our long-term vision, is to lower that barrier to entry, make it easier for people to gain optimized exposure to games and the industry as a whole, in a more simplified way.
Yeah, just before we continue, guys, of course, all of JP's socials and everything are going to be in the description down below, as well as the Arcade Discord. So definitely go and jump in there if you want any more information after this discussion. But we're going to definitely try and cover as much as we
Yeah.
possibly can. So the next thing I need to really delve into, I'm mostly a proponent for Ethereum and IMX and these sort of things, but I am starting to see the light with other sorts of layer twos and things like that as well. They're all very useful, of course, but I'm very much, I think Ethereum will still be the dominant force for years to come. Um, your white paper says that Solana, you're building on Solana. Can you talk me, given the games are on so many different ecosystems, obviously you don't really have a winning scenario here, but do you have kind of like what's the main reasoning behind choosing
Yeah.
Solana?
Yeah. So, I think it's really important to note that the arcade platform itself is chain agnostic in the way that we give exposure to the ecosystem as a whole. So, you know, we we allow users to gain exposure to games on a wide range of networks, right? We support Illuvium on IMX Ethereum. We have Star Atlas on Solana. We have other games on BSC, on Avalanche. So we really are giving people that one-stop solution for a lot of different games. Now, gaining exposure to a game on those chains is different than the actual interaction with the platform, which you're referring to, which is on Solana. So the reason that we picked Solana initially is we were looking for something that, when we created Arcade, this was back when Ethereum gas fees were like $500 per transaction, right? It was like crazy. It was at
Hmm.
the height of the mania. And we were looking at it like, okay, well, Ethereum is obviously not going to work because the nature of our platform and mission pools, you have to do a lot of transactions, right? You're in and out of these mission pools pretty often. So we were looking for a scalable solution that allowed for people to have an affordable way to gain access to GameFi, right? Because our whole ethos, going back to like our long-term vision, is making it easier to get into GameFi, right? Having a high gas fee is the opposite of that. So we were looking for a network that was fast, had market adoption, and had really low fees. So at the time, Solana fit that bill, and it still does, right? Solana has had its share of challenges, growing pains with the network and stuff like
Hmm.
that. I think they are working on some very clever solutions, but I do want to say that the future of our platform, I believe, will be multi-chain to this, in the sense that I think we'll have multiple ways to access the platform
Mm.
across different chains, so that you do have the choice of what chain you want to interact with. At the moment, that interaction will happen on Solana, but really part of the value add that we have, I think, for people that are looking for a more simplified way to gain access to GameFi, if they can, figure out Solana, that's the only chain they have to figure out how to use in order to gain diversified exposure to games
Mm.
across a wide number of chains, right? They don't have to have 10 different wallets. They can just have the one wallet, the arcade token, and gain access to all these different ecosystems.
Mm. Do you know where the arcade token might be sold? Is it mostly going to be on dexes and things on Solana?
Yeah, so we're having a bit of a two-prong approach to our sale. So our public sale is actually going to occur on Solana and Ethereum. That's
Okay.
a little bit confusing because our platform itself is only based on Solana, right? But our development team created a one-way bridge to basically bridge the tokens that are sold on Ethereum to the Solana network.
Okay.
And the reason we did it this way is that we have such a large following on the Ethereum network from our other projects, Illuvium, the Gala Games ecosystem,
Mm.
um, that our community was saying, okay, we're fine with using the platform on Solana, but like we really want to be able to buy it on Ethereum because we don't have capital on Solana. Like we'll bridge the tokens over after.
Sure.
So that's why we went that way. So we're looking to do a launch on Copper, Copper launch, if
Yeah.
you're familiar. It's like
Yeah.
yeah, and then on the Solana side, we'll have Star Launch. So those are our two platforms that we're going to be using, and they'll both be like a fair launch style where it'll be a price decay, and the market will decide what the token's worth.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So, when do you think this token launch and even your platform launch kind of might occur? Do you thinking this year, in line with Illuvium? I'm hoping.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Our platform is actually built. So when people are looking into Arcade, they can feel confidence that, we're not a hypothetical, we're not a theoretical project. Our platform is built. Our smart contracts are done. They've been audited by Halborn. Um, so we
Hmm.
are built. We could deploy tomorrow. Now, with that said, it is about timing the market, right? Because our platform is only as useful as the games that we can make mission pools out of. And so this is why it's so important for us to have a really strong communication, a line of communication with these teams that are building games, because it is in our best interest to launch the platform alongside like a public launch of Illuvium,
Mm.
or the next module from Star Atlas or whatever. So um, I guess in short, I do think it'll be this year. I can't give any guarantees because, as we've seen, the games developing in this space are, you know, it's a lot to build a AAA quality game. And I think
Cool.
people underestimate how much time and energy really goes into that. So it's just going to kind of depend. We'll try to give people at least a 10-week notice on when our public sale is. We're not just going to spring it on you like, hey, the sale's in 1 week or something like that. That's just not the way we do things. But I think people can, uh, they can rest easy knowing that we are a platform that is built. It's just kind of a matter of waiting for the right time to execute.
Okay, so we're going to go into mission pools a little bit later and really nut down on that entire process because I'm really curious about kind of how it works and the incentives and things around that. But the first thing we have to touch on is that you guys are going to be implementing a two token system, the arcade and XRK. I think that's what it's called.
Yep.
What is the goal for using two tokens? Because from what I understand, you essentially swap your arcade for X arcade to use it. Why not just use the arcade token?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, we actually took a lot of inspiration from Illuvium in their model, because I think that the ILV and SILV model is brilliant. And so when we were looking at our tokenomics, we thought, okay, we need a way to have more oversight or more, control over the different levers that we can pull within our platform. Because what we're creating, the arcade platform itself, is like a little mini economy. It's a gamified way to gain optimized exposure to in-game activities, but really the way that we do that is by we have to be able to determine somehow what percentage of the outstanding supply is being used for its utility as the XRK token versus being traded on the open market. The easiest way to do that, right? If we had just the arcade token, let's say that there's 10 million tokens outstanding, but only 1 million of those tokens are intended for use on our platform. So we have 10% of the supply on our platform ready to deploy into mission pools, and the other 90% is locked up on exchanges, or it's on DEX, or it's in a wallet, just kind of like, sitting there.
Mm.
And that leaves a lot of room for inconsistency in what we can expect for the amount of tokens going into mission pools, right? But if we have the XRK token, that allows for us to see which tokens are purposefully put on our platform and ready to be used in mission pools. So if we can see, okay, only 10% of those 10 million tokens, right? 1 million tokens are in XRK, then really when we're building out um, the size of these mission pools, the only thing we have to factor in within a small margin of error is the 1 million tokens, the 10%, and not the full supply that's out on exchanges not being used on our platform. And so this allows for us to make much more accurate decisions in the way that we structure the mission pools, the duration, the amount that can be locked into it, and stuff of that nature. So ultimately, this is going to lead to a better experience for the user. It allows for them to have a more optimized experience because they're not having to fight against variables that aren't necessarily in play.
That's really interesting. I never really thought about it that way around, but I think I think that makes sense to me now. That it gives you a lot more transparency, which certainly helps your decision making. And we're going to go into that soon. But the decision making is some of the stuff I can't quite get my head around yet. I
Yeah,
like to
no.
think I can understand things pretty well, but your system is very well optimized. Let's put it that way. Okay,
Yeah,
so
the XRK token also, I'll just say real quick, there
yeah,
is sometimes some confusion on like what is that. So the XRK token is actually it's a synthetic version of the arcade token, but it's essentially escrowed arcade token.
yeah,
So for your viewers that are familiar with Illuvium, it's a very similar concept, but we're not just pulling tokens out of thin air, right? It's what's actually happening is you're depositing 100 arcade tokens. It's being locked away in escrow, and then the contract mints an equal amount at a 1-to-1 ratio of the XRK token as escrowed arcade. And then when you exit the ecosystem, you get back that same amount of arcade token, proportionally. Um, so we're not just pulling tokens out of thin air and adding to the supply or something, right? There will always be a 1-to-1 backing of the arcade token against XRcade.
so that actually does, and we're going to circle back to this later, but I should probably ask it now. In the mission pools, when you receive rewards from the mission pools, you're essentially getting extra XRK tokens. Obviously, say your mission pool is earning Ethereum, that's getting converted into XRK. How is that interaction sort of working?
So initially, it's going to be a fairly manual process until we make sure that everything is working as intended. But as you said, it will be um, there will be an exchange of tokens of the XRK token, or I'm sorry, of the Ethereum that's earned from a game. And then that will become XRK. And then once it's XRK, it's redistributed to the mission pools. And in the process of us doing that, we on our end are adding additional arcade to the escrow pile, right? So
Mm.
we're converting and adding that arcade so that
Right.
it remains that 1-to-1 peg. And then we're giving the X arcade, instead of keeping it for ourselves, we're giving the X arcade to the user, the mission pool contributor. And then when they exit, they can still maintain that 1-to-1 peg because we locked up the arcade for them. And then we gave them the X arcade back and said, hey, you can use
Mm.
this in another mission pool, or if you wish to exit the ecosystem, you still have that 1-to-1 peg to exit as you wish.
So, like the Ethereum, if say you were getting Ethereum rewards for like Illuvium
Mhm.
Land or something, you would be buying arcade off the open market and then locking that up.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's how I thought it worked. I just wanted to double check and hone in on it.
Right.
So this next bit is really interesting. So in the first stage of Arcade, in your white paper, I think I can bring it up here in just 1 second. You've got these three stages. I really wanted to bring it up. 1 second. There you go. You've got these three stages of the Arcade ecosystem, right?
Hmm.
So with stage one, you're talking about owned by Arcade, whereas the first version of the mission pools are being managed by your partner guild with all in-game NFTs owned by Arcade and give immediate opportunity for token holders to have sufficient mission pools to participate in. So this is really, really good. And you don't rely on third parties as of yet. So my
Hmm.
question really coming from that is what benefit do you gain? Because essentially what I'm seeing here is that you own all the NFTs. Essentially all you're doing is you're giving away a slice of your pie to contributors.
Right. So there's a few different things, right? But I think the main thing is that our goal is to provide utility for the arcade token holders, the contributors that are looking to get their piece of a system that is inherently kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You know,
Out of
it's
out of
a
reach.
system. Yeah, it's a system that's out of reach for people, right? But our goal and our belief is that by giving people that access without those barriers, that we're going to bring in a meaningful amount of new users into the space, which is good for our business model, the business model of the games that we work with. And so, how Arcade is actually making money is based on essentially traffic of these users. And so our revenue comes from a small percentage of the earnings that are coming from these mission pools, but we get that revenue, and then we can reinvest that revenue as we see fit to buy additional assets, and then kind of compound from there. So we are, we could just go into this with the game guild model and raise a bunch of capital and then buy it and keep 100% of it for ourselves, but really we're trying to have a more meaningful impact on the industry as a whole, and the best way to do that, we believe, is through this mission pool model, because we're benefiting from it, and then we're also allowing for new users coming into the space to benefit in a way that they currently can't, and hopefully have a meaningful impact in the direction that the GameFi ecosystem is going as a whole.
So do you expect many of these mission pool contributors to eventually buy their own NFTs, and then when you scale up to the next stage in your platform, they're adding NFTs into the ecosystem? Do you expect to have a lot of NFTs being added in from outside?
So yeah, a big part of our scalability model is to have outside, contributors of the NFTs themselves. So, you know, initially, like you said, we're Arcade owns all of these assets, right? So we're operating a little bit, um, you know, not like a fund, I guess, but we're buying and holding these NFTs and using them for their utility within these games through our partners. And so that, as you said, is a way for us to reduce dependency on third parties. If we have to worry about finding whales that can contribute the NFTs or finding game guilds to contribute the NFTs initially, we believed that that was going to be an uphill battle for the initial stages of the project, and it would be tough to provide utility for the token. So we're initially going to be buying them. And then I think part of our plan is to shift the majority of that NFT contribution away from us and into the hands of third parties that will be able to, contribute. We're looking and we're talking to people like other hedge funds that traditionally they buy things like NFTs, excuse me, and they sit on them for price appreciation, but they never have the time
Mm.
or the interest in actually using. We're in such an emerging space. This is so new to everyone, but the hedge funds we've talked to so far are like, yeah, we have $10 million of game NFTs because we think that GameFi is going to blow up, but like we don't have the time to play $10 million worth of NFTs, right? Like, so they're leaving a lot on the table, and a way that we can kind of be that bridge is we can work with those funds or those huge family offices that have the traditional money, um, and tell them, look, you can still have your passive experience as a fund, but work with us to create a revenue opportunity or an additional line of revenue from those NFTs while you're sitting on them. And I think that is really where our platform is going to blow up, is when we start working with this traditional money that has millions, millions and millions and millions to deploy.
So one thing I do need to ask is, you say that the smart contracts are already complete and everything like that. Um, how do you plan on really locking and renting out these NFTs and things like that, right? So say you had a land NFT. That's a bad example because in this case it's supposedly going to be built. But say you had a land NFT and Illuvium had not natively made a renting platform or renting system. Do you
Mhm.
have ways of renting it out and locking it up and everything? Or would you need to make sure you're partnered up with Illuvium to build in those systems?
Yeah, so that is, I think, one of the biggest challenges that we've had is determining the best way for trustless lending of these assets. And Um, I think you brought up a good point initially, that Illuvium is a bad example. I think maybe it's a good example because we're selectively working with projects that we know are building in that functionality um, initially. Now, part of our long term plan, we're backed and supported by IQ Protocol, a project from Parsec. We're in talk with 3 to 5 other different protocols that are building out trustless lending solutions for
Mm.
NFTs. So we're working on the back end on tech that we can build into our platform to do this. Now, some of it is in beta, some of it is soon to be in beta. So we're not far off from it. I think that there's so much demand for trustless lending within the NFT GameFi ecosystem that this is going to be a solution that exists within months. So the initial stages is work with projects that are building this into their games. Um, Option number two is that we work with guilds that we have a relationship with or a controlling interest in, so that we can have a kind of a pseudo trustless lending system. And then step three is integrating things like IQ protocol that are building out technical solutions for trustless lending across ecosystems. So we have a few different ways that we're approaching it.
So, in the case of Illuvium, how are you going to be managing the renting and everything that they've already got built into their land? How do you? I guess the outflow is what I'm thinking of. How are you managing that outflow? For example, if a person who's using the land NFT to manage the land and earn Ethereum and so on and so forth, they earn Ethereum. That goes straight to you, I suppose, and then you automatically deploy that into the smart contract for the mission pool.
Yeah, so the flow is kind of, so in the example of the Illuvium land, we're working with our partner guild, Banana DAO initially. And so the way that so we don't know exactly how the custody is going to work for the Illuvium system yet, but we know that there's going to be a trustless solution. Even if there wasn't a trustless solution, in the case of Banana DAO, we own a controlling interest in the guild. So we would just give them custody of those NFTs and then let them do their thing as guild members to manage them. But my understanding is that there will be a built-in system for a split to happen on the land itself within Illuvium. So when Banana DAO is managing the land that Arcade has custody of, again, this is making some assumptions about their model, but I
Hmm.
believe that's going to be the case, then we will be able to build in a split. So the guild gets their split off the top. So the guild or the mission pool operator, let's say their cut is 10%, then they would get their 10% off the top, and then the 90% would be sent back to Arcade, and then our team plugs that into the system to do the necessary exchanges from Ethereum into XRK, take that XRK and distribute it back to the mission pool contributors from there. So the game guild or the mission pool operator takes their cut off the top, and then they send the rest back to us in a manual process if needed. But I believe Illuvium system is going to be more automated, to where, kind of like Fancy Birds, where um, it'll allow for a split to happen automatically inside the system.
Yeah, that's definitely my understanding as well. All right, so let's jump onto mission pools. So this is this is kind of the backbone of your ecosystem at this point, and honestly, I really like the name too. So kudos to whoever came
Yeah.
up with that one. Um, so the first one is the mission pool operators. Now these are going to be the people that are essentially operating the NFTs, whether it's flying a fancy bird to complete daily quests, or it's to manage Illuvium Land and earn Ethereum from selling fuel. So, what vetting process do you plan to use on your mission pool operators? And like, is there not an IQ test? Do they do like a
Yeah.
do they do like a skill test or something? If we're talking
Yeah.
about a broader sense of games.
Yeah. So initially, it's going to be a fairly manual process. We have to ensure the stability of our platform before we start opening it up to like anyone can become an MPO. Now, over time, I think we will have a more open market approach to this, to where the barrier to become an MPO will be fairly attainable, or it'll
Mm,
be fairly low and attainable. And then when you think of a fair market economy, if you can compare two like activities and see historical data on who has
mm,
been more successful, then naturally you're going to deposit your XRK tokens into the mission pool operators that are more successful. And then the ones that aren't are just not going to have their missions launched because they're not going to get enough traction. So I think the market will figure itself out, when we have that kind of sense of competition amongst them, because we are a very data driven platform. So when you look at a mission pool, you're going to be able to see, okay, historically speaking, Shiny Shards has been this successful in extracting, this resource, or Banana DAO has won this number of Illuvium matches or tournaments versus another guild, and so you'll be able to look at those metrics and say, okay, and the guilds have some say also in the percentage that they're willing to take as an MPO. So this adds an additional variable to where the guilds that have really good reputations might charge a higher percentage because you're basically paying more for that guarantee of quality. And then the lesser known operators might be like, okay, well, we'll give you more percentage of the yield from the pool in exchange for trying to attract you to someone that's not as known or doesn't have as good of a reputation. So I think there's going to be this open market economy that we're going to create over time. But at least initially in the early stages, or at least for the first few months, the main guild, or the main guild you're going to see on the platform, is our partner guild, Banana DAO, and that's kind of like our proof of concept to show like everything works properly as intended, and then we'll start to
mm.
layer in additional guilds. We have contacts and relationships with all of the major guilds in the space. We're in talks with basically any guild you can name, probably, and so those will all be added into the platform over time.
So yeah, so that's kind of how I saw it too. That you're essentially betting on an operator's success and things like that. But that brings up a whole other set of questions. So we're going to delve into that a little bit as well.
Hmm.
So your white paper mentions that there are metrics for token holders to analyze the mission pool. So let's say you have a mission pool and it's 1 week of earning Ethereum off of Illuvium Land or something, right?
Hmm.
We keep coming back to that example because it's the most tangible one at the moment.
No, yeah, that's great. I love that example.
So 1 week of Illuvium Land revenue. What are your metrics? So how do you get the initial metric? How do you go like 1,000 XRK tokens can be put into this mission pool to earn rewards? What if XRK tokens are worth way more than the rewards they're going to get? It's going to be like 0.001%
Yeah.
thinger. I guess on the very first one, is it going to be kind of like a free for all? And then based on the results of initial ones, it will build out metrics. That's kind of how I'm understanding it.
Yeah, exactly. So initially, it is going to be a lot of assumptions about our model. Now, we do have some much smarter people than me working on spreadsheets and the platform economy and stuff of that nature. So fortunate to have really smart people around me. That saying that you never want to be the smartest person in the room. So we have a really talented team that's working on those metrics and figuring out those numbers. And so it's going to be best guess for the initial mission pools. And we're also having a period called our Project Alpha testing, which is going to be basically a closed alpha live mainnet test of these things, so that we can work through some of those numbers and get some of that figured out ahead of time before that's going to happen, even before our public launch. Um, and so, that Project Alpha is really the intention of that, is to figure out some of those balances, because we are going to have a lot of leverage that we can pull. Is it 500 XRK? Is it 10,000 XRK that can be locked in this mission pool? Is it 5 days or is it 7 days? Is it, you know, in order to hit like a desirable yield from an in-game activity, or a reward, a desirable reward from an in-game activity rather. Um, what levers do we need to pull? What balancing do we need to do? So there's going to be a lot we figure out on the go, I think. But that's kind of the intention of that alpha testing, so that when users, our intention is for the day that we have our public sale. We don't want to be one of those platforms that sells something without something to deliver on. So our intention is the day that we have our public sale, you'll be able to take those tokens and immediately have a mission pool or a utility on our platform to use it for. We don't want to be like a lot of these platforms where, oh, buy our token and we'll get the mission pools out to you eventually, right? Like that's just not the vibe that we're going for. So I think that alpha testing will tell us a lot, but in terms of metrics that people will be able to analyze, it's going to be based on historical data, right? Because the mission pools, and I think this is even one of the most exciting parts of this whole thing, is that the mission pools have so much variability based on human execution, right? I mean, it's not like a staking pool where you deposit your tokens and you have a 10%
Mm,
guaranteed yield. If it's a ship mission in Star Atlas, a freight mission from one planet to another, maybe one week it goes totally smoothly and you get your reward, and the next week you get attacked by pirates and the MPO loses the whole yield, and then your return is zero, right? So there is not even a guarantee of reward. There is a, historically speaking, this type of activity has yielded this reward, right?
mm,
But there's a variability, there's risk always, and there's no risk of loss, right? I want to be clear that when you deposit your XRK as a contributor, that XRK is not being spent, it's not being used to buy assets, not being gambled away. It's locked in its own separate smart contract. You always get your XRK back, but you could waste time, right? Maybe it's a
mm.
7-day mission and the mission fails. The game guild loses their ship or they lose the whole thing because they got attacked. Then your return would just be what you put in, right? And maybe you wasted 7 days. And then historically speaking, that game guild or that MPO is going to have a big X on their history saying one time they weren't successful, right? So those are the kind of metrics you're going to be able to analyze on our platform to see, okay, Shiny Shards has had 10 weeks straight of successfully, hitting this level of extraction from their land.
Mm.
Whereas maybe Banana DAO only had 8 of 10 weeks that they hit that level, right? So those are the kind of things that people will be able to compare.
Yeah, yeah. You know me. I'll be running the numbers myself. I love the idea of gamifying this sort of stuff because I feel like I can like really hone in on it if I want to and try and find
I think
the
what's really
correct
fun,
answer.
I think that's what excites me most about our platform is that we're not just like some boring, um, you know, connect wallet, click here to deposit, come back in 10 weeks and you have a yield. Our platform is a game itself, right? And people don't see that, but arcade is a grand strategy game, right? Like we're not a AAA quality like point and shoot, click and all of that, but it is a grand strategy game because the decisions you make as a contributor, what mission pool operators you support, what mission pools you go into, directly impact the level of reward that you get. So, you know, creators like you are really going to have a lot of fun with this, I think, because you're going to be able to look and see, okay, this MPO has been really crushing it lately. Like, look at the numbers coming out of this one, or look at this smaller MPO that no one knows about that got like, X number of return higher than the most popular one. Like, go try this guy out. They have some secret up their sleeve for like how to do this better. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
You never know. Maybe I'm even an MPO.
Exactly, it could happen. That's what.
Um, so there is kind of like a burning question in my mind about all this, right? There's two sides of this coin, so bear with me.
Mhm.
Firstly, you have say there's a million XRK in the system, and you only have a certain amount of NFTs. Then maybe the yield across the board, if you had to facilitate all 1 million, or if you didn't allow all 1 million as first in best dress, then you have this weird, really weird demand supply problem. The other side of things is if you do have enough NFTs, let's say, and things like that, and there's a lot of mission pools going, kind of what's the yield that you're settling on? Because I'd assume you'd want to kind of balance it out as much as you can and be like, okay, so you're typically going to get a 10% APR sort of yield on any given mission pool is kind of what you're aiming for. How are those metrics kind of what's the plan for those sorts of metrics in there, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I think this is a really complex question because I think what the market is going to deem a acceptable reward is going to change a lot over the years, right? I mean, we just came out of like the DeFi summer mania where everyone was
Mm.
getting like 10,000% APY. And then everyone started to realize, okay, none of this is sustainable. I lost all of my tokens to inflation. Um, so I think because our mission pools are backed by something, right? They're backed by revenue and by rewards coming out of these different play and earn opportunities, that I think the acceptable reward level is going to be lower than people currently imagine based on like these super inflationary emissions driven, race to the bottom type APYs that you can see. And so I think it's going to change a lot over time, but what I consider in my mind to be like an acceptable return or reward, and what you in your mind consider an acceptable return, is going to probably be different. I think everyone is going to have a difference, and you have to consider that when traditional finance starts to step into the space, which we believe they are going to. We've talked to a lot of I got to be careful what I say here. We've talked to a lot of big traditional finance people that for them, 5% is a big number, right? You
Mm.
consider that they're getting 0.25% in their bank account or on their CD. They're getting, whatever. They're, less than 1% yield for a lot of the biggest money in the world is like the going rate, right? So they look at 5%, they're like, wow, that's 5 times more than I've been getting. That sounds great. Like, let me deploy 5% of my overall portfolio into this new emerging space as a high risk play. Not to say that 5% is the standard we're going for. I just think that over time it's going to be really interesting to see what is considered an acceptable reward for a more sustainable business model, because we're not just some emissions driven inflationary
Mm.
like number pie in the sky that you don't know where the yield is coming from. You know what they say, if you don't know where the yield is coming from, you are the yield. I think that's a good way to look at things, because in our model, where everything is coming from. So it's going to be lower, right? Like, I don't want people to expect 1,000% APY, because I think realistically speaking, if you were to calculate, like a reward that you're going to get, it's probably going to be somewhere between 20 and 50% is like probably where people are going to be happiest. And I think over time, we're going to even see that number get lower as people start to realize that, like, okay, sustainability and a proven model is more important than a super big number that we know is just going to go down and down and down.
Yeah, so the other side of this I really want to investigate is esports. I don't know if you've factored that into your model yet, but I'm imagining this scenario where, as you said, we're essentially trying to pick the best mission pool operators in a sense.
Hmm.
If some of them are playing in the top pro leagues for esports for a variety of different games, would they make that a mission pool? Would they be like, I'm going to take all this deck of alluvials, I'm going to borrow this from Arcade, and now
Yep.
I'm going to create a mission pool. I'm going to go into the leaderboard thing. I'm going to go into the leaderboard or into this tournament or something. Do you think I'm going to win?
Yeah, so esports is on our mind. We've actually talked to a lot of the biggest esports teams in legacy gaming, and spoiler alert, or I guess not spoiler alert, but um, the sad news is a lot of these big esports teams are like totally anti-crypto at the moment. So we're still really early. But I think esports is going to have its own upbringing within the Web3 space, as I'm sure you agree. Like, there'll be teams that come out
Mm,
of Web3 itself, but this is constantly on our mind. And I think, in an example of like an Illuvium tournament, what would happen is a mission pool operator could be a contestant in that tournament. Arcade can provide all of like the highest ranked or the highest rated alluvials, right? The most leveled up alluvials that might be really expensive for other people to get their hands on for like a Leviathan Arena type tournament. And so we are enabling people with the talent to compete to not have to worry about the costs that it requires, right? So we're kind of like sponsoring these MPOs by providing them the assets that they need, or the NFTs that they need to be competitive, because people don't understand that, at least in legacy gaming, esports tournaments cost a lot of money. Like, to be a successful esports player, you have to have been recognized by a team, sponsored, given tons of money, your stuff paid for. And so Arcade can pay for those expenses or provide the NFTs to a player, so that a
Mm,
player that's really good at the game doesn't have to worry about, well, I'm really good, but I can't afford to be competitive because like I
mm.
can't afford the alluvials that I need. I can't afford the entry fees into the tournaments. And then yeah, a mission pool could be that player that Arcade is backing going into a tournament. If they win, then they share a portion of whatever kind of in-game rewards they would get from that activity back to the mission pool, and it's kind of this harmonious cycle of us being able to support the greatest professional talent in a competitive way. So I think there definitely is a lot of room for esports in our model.
So the other thing the last thing I'll say on the esports thing is, for example, if the Illuvium Leviathan Arena came into effect, and for those of you in the audience that don't know, the Leviathan Arena, essentially you have some Ethereum, you kind of wager it up, and then there's a pot of Ethereum, and whoever wins takes the Ethereum, and so on and so forth, right? So it's essentially an entry fee to a 1v1 competition. Would that entry fee be fronted by the mission pool, or would that kind of mission pool scenario not really exist? How do you think that might work?
So there's a few different ways that we can go about it, but I think it's a developing situation. We plan to have sponsors for our platform as well. So, there could be a situation where like Pepsi sponsors a tournament and we go out, we negotiate it with Pepsi, they front the capital, and then they get some notoriety, and then the tournament is financially supported by them, so that because uh, one situation, or I guess to answer your question more directly, there's never going to be a situation where a mission pool contributor is paying for something, right? Like
They can never
at least
lose.
initially, they can never lose, right? So like the mission pool contributors would not be paying the entry fee because then there's a risk of loss. So that situation would never happen. But we do have options in terms of sponsors, or Arcade could even pull from our treasury to pay that entry fee, right? So like there might be opportunities where it makes marketing sense for us to come out of pocket to pay the entry fee, and then that way that there's a zero cost basis for that mission pool. There's tons of different ways that we can spend it on our side, but there's never going to be a situation where a contributor has a risk of loss.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to the bottom of. I'm sure that'll make a lot of people happy. Yeah, no, I think it's a really interesting system, and I love anything gamified. I think most
Yeah.
things in this world, as soon as they get gamified, I'm in. Okay, so the last thing we need to cover off is the mission pool flow, and we've covered it a lot already in this chat, but we'll just make sure we get all the nuts and bolts. So I'm going to go through it, and you'll let me know kind of if I've said something wrong, and you might delve into a bit more
Okay.
detail. So, firstly, the NFT owner assigns their assets to an operator, essentially. At the early stages, that would be yourself. The
Mhm.
operator then goes onto the web platform and creates the activity pool. What's stopping them from not creating the activity pool? Do you want to
So,
walk me through that?
yeah, for sure. So, like you said, the NFT owner initially is Arcade, right? So, over time, there will be NFT owners that are contributing their NFTs to the platform. Um, And in that situation, that NFT owner is actually going to have a more hands-off experience. They don't have to pick and choose what gamer operates the NFT. They just work with Arcade. So they tell Arcade, "Here's my 100 Star Atlas ships. Do as you will
Mm,
with them, and then give me back my cut of the activity." So then we would select what mission pool operators. We work very closely with the mission pool operators to say, okay, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What kind of players do you have? Like, are they people that are really good at finding blueprints, or like, do they just want to focus on finding blueprints, or is it, harvesting resources, or it can really be anything. It could be running a tavern in Miranda's. Like, you have someone that's really good at business that just wants to like sit there and run a virtual tavern or something. So we work closely with the mission pool operators to pair them with the NFTs that make the most sense for their strengths. The operator then they have their own like dashboard, like a back end that they log into to submit information for mission pools to be created. So like the operator will work with the operator to say, okay, create this mission pool activity based on like the resources you have. They'll submit it. Our dev team will post it to the site, allow for users to pile into that activity. There'll be like a short window of time before the activity actually starts. We're working on like a notification system, bots, stuff like that that will alert you, like, hey, a new mission pool has been
Okay.
posted or whatever, right? So we're working on some like alert systems for that. Um, and then yeah, so it's a little bit of a collaborative effort between the mission pool operator and our team to actually post that mission pool, because we don't want people to just be wildly posting mission pools without any kind of like approval process from us. That's just like a checks and balances thing that we initially have. Over time, we'll probably have a more streamlined process, but at least initially, as I'm sure you can appreciate, a lot of this is like a little bit more oversight from us to make sure that things are working properly.
So, with that small window of time until the thing starts, but couldn't you run into a problem where you have a lot of demand and then all of a sudden you've got 500 people trying to enter the mission pool and only a couple of them manage to get through and now the rest of them have to wait for the next mission pool? How are you going to deal with those sorts of.
Yeah.
It's
So I,
tricky.
No, I mean, I think that's a fair question. I think it's probably one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have is that, at least hopefully, fingers crossed, we're going to have so much demand that we probably will have a situation, at least initially, where there's more XRK holders than can fit into a mission pool. And some ways that we're working on that is to, number one, make sure we have a lot of NFTs on our side that we can deploy into the model, but also having anti-whale measures in place to where there will be no minimum, because again, we're trying to make it as easily accessible as possible. So if someone that only has $10 to their name wants to gain exposure to GameFi, they have the same right to do that, right? With their their 1 or 10 XRK tokens. But we will have a max amount that one wallet can contribute to try to prevent, because we have a lot of traditional money and venture capital partners that, like, we don't want them coming in and buying up 95% of every single mission pool, and then the average user is like, okay, there's no room for me, right? So we'll have some kind of max amount that can be contributed. Um, and then I think it's just going to be a little bit of a balancing act. Like the initial mission pools might be a little bit like first come first serve, and then we'll take that information based on like how fast did this fill up, what percentage of the amount, and then change it from there. But you have to also consider that because we can see how much XRK is on the platform because of that two token system, we can much more accurately determine, okay, if there's 1,000 XRK on the platform and we have 10 mission pools, then maybe make each mission pool have a cap of 110 tokens so that there's like just barely more space than we have total circulating tokens in the economy. Now, where that changes things is if we were to match at a 1-to-1 ratio in that regard, like we'll have to run some calculations on, like, based on the previous mission pool cycles, what percentage of the outstanding XRK supply actually went into the mission pools,
Mm.
and then we can take that information to more closely narrow down how big they need to be. Because if the mission pool's too big, as the mission pool gets bigger, the reward per
Yeah.
XRK token gets smaller, right? So like that's simple economics. So we don't want it to be a huge cap, and then people, that negatively impact their reward per token. So it's a little bit of a balancing act. I think there will be a supply and demand situation initially that'll drive the price of the token up. Not financial advice. It's a utility token, not an investment. Um, but yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a balancing act, and we'll try to make it as friendly as possible. My goal personally is that if you have an XRK token, we want you to be able to go into a mission pool at any time, right? Like that
Mm.
probably is realistically not always going to be the case, because it's, especially at first, it's going to be a little bit tricky to find that right balance of what we can expect and what is reality. But that's my goal. We don't want people to have the XRK token and be like, wow, everything's full. Like that would just be a crap user experience.
Yeah, in theory, the more used the tokens are and things like that, then overall the arcade tokens will increase in price and then essentially balance out the yield and that sort of thing on its own in theory. So, yeah,
We
I
think it
think
will
it'll
be
work out.
self-regulating
Yeah,
to an extent. It'll be self-regulating, but
I,
I do
I
think
think you
there's
need to
levers we're
scale
going to
first,
deploy.
though. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you need to scale first. I think as Arcade just owns all the NFTs, it might be a bit tricky to fit everyone in, given there's. I
Hmm.
think there will be demand, but obviously we don't know that for sure. But as you scale, I definitely think you'll have no problem. So I'm looking forward to picking the best mission pool and those sorts of things, and even talking about it on the channel if that interests you guys. So leave a comment down below if you think I should cover Arcade in more detail and as I go, and what you guys think of the overall project. So definitely let me know. I think we're going to wrap it up there. I learned everything I wanted to learn. I think we covered the platform really, really well. Thank you so much for your time. Yeah, just big thanks for jumping on with me and giving me the insights.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just leave your viewers with one last thing. We have I don't know if you've noticed yet from being in our community or not, but we sometimes give out special rules in our Discord for people that come from events that we do. So we'll do a special little thing for your viewers and anyone that comes into our Discord from this video and says like, "Hey, I came from Scoriox.eth YouTube." Just tag me or tag one of the mods in the Gen chat, and we'll give you a special rule. That rule is going to get airdropped in NFT. I can't give you guys too much information about what NFTs are coming to our platform, but wink, wink, alpha. We have some utility NFTs that are going to play into our model, and I think you actually, Scoriox, are going to be really interested in the way that these utility NFTs can play with the economy a little bit. So more on that later, but I think you'll have some fun looking in those as well.
That does sound exciting. Now I really want to know what it is. All right. So again, big thanks for joining me. As always, guys, all of the socials are going to be down in the description down below. JP's Twitter, the Arcade Discord, Arcade Twitter, so on and so forth. It's going to be all down there. Go check it out. This is definitely a project that I've got really high hopes for, and I think you're not going to want to miss out on. So thanks for joining me, man.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. And yeah, I'll see you next time.